Just a lot of digits. Okay. All right, so we're live. Welcome to the Linux user group for, goodness gracious, we're almost done with May, guys. Did you guys know that? So, this is the second lug of the month. We do 2 lugs a month. The first one is in the morning. The second one is in the evening. So if you guys want to join this, we're going to leave it as a little treasure hunt. You'll figure out how to do it. Otherwise, you can just watch it live. But today's topic is going to be Wayland. Is it ready? / does it even matter? And while I know that on the podcast, we've talked about this before, we really haven't talked about it in the lug. So that's what we're going to do. So just a quick poll, at least of those of you who have cameras on. Who is actually using Wayland on their main machine? So we have 3 of the people who have the cameras on. Those of you who don't have cameras, Arch Penguin raises his digital hand. So yes, we have a few. Who's absolutely refusing to use Wayland, probably forever? War Thunder for sure. No, nobody else. Okay, so you're about their own, and Drew's kind of like iffy. So there's some people. All right. Why am I having bad feedback? Joe, Jerry, we're gonna mute you. I think it's coming from your end. There you go. All right. Audio problems on Linux. Tradition. Remember? Anyways, so just to give you a brief thing, that's where we're all on Wayland. I have turned around 180%, 180 degrees on Wayland, kinda. So everyone knows that I was like truly anti-Wayland, like really. I mean, I made a video like over my dead body will I be switching to Wayland, and then like 3 weeks later, I got a monitor that has a different resolution than the one that I have here, and Xorg handles that like shit. So needs must, right? So just to go around, who has a strong argument for or against that wants to talk first? Anybody want to do that? Someone raise their hand so Matt doesn't talk the whole 2 hours all by himself. All right, Zipux, go ahead.
Yeah, so I have been on a little journey this week. I have tried Hyprland for the first time. And for the most part, I got everything working. The only issue that I had come across was with OBS. OBS does not do the custom browser docs at all that I have seen so far. If anyone knows an answer to that, do let me know, because I was able to do it on X11, but I haven't been able to do it on Wayland. And custom browser docs are something that are essential to me whenever I do streaming and stuff like that. I would like to know like who's chatting and like the live control room and stuff like that. So in a lot of ways, it can be good, but for me, it was missing that, and I had to go back to X11.
Mm-hmm. ACPI, go ahead. You're gonna have to unmute yourself if you want to talk. Okay, didn't want to talk.
Hello?
Oh,
my
go
gosh.
ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I just want to like make sure that like I am really here for like the BSD angle. And I know this is like a lug or whatever, but if I'm fine to get on my like BSD soapbox when it comes to Wayland, I think a lot of well, like all of the BSDs, I guess, the OpenBSD, FreeBSD, and NetBSD, there's kind of a big Wayland is very like Linux centric, and even though like the licenses and stuff are not GPL'd, and so they can be they're like ideologically compatible with BSDs, there's a lot of Linuxisms, I guess, inside of Wayland that kind of has shied away from like that has kind of made all the desktop BSD users kind of shy away from it, because there needs to be such a big pull of like Linux stuff into the BSD userland, which just kind of I don't know, has kind of like prevented a lot of BSD users from picking up. And so I think if the whole Unix desktop wants to kind of pick up Wayland, there needs to be a more conceited effort to make it more cross-platform, which sounds silly, but it is currently very like Linux centric.
Well, in a way, you're probably lucky that it's not license compatible yet, because you guys get to let the Linux guys be the guinea pigs, and when it eventually does make it away to the BSDs, it might actually be a little bit less buggy than it is right now, but you never know.
Yeah. And the flip side of that, sorry, is that at least for a while, there's going to be a semi-large user base of like, technically literate people who are going to continue developing Xorg. So that's not going to really drop off the map, because right now Xorg is actually developed by like one of the main developers is just somebody who kind of works at Solaris for Oracle. So they're probably not going to stop developing Xorg for the foreseeable future. So it kind of, as much as people are pushing Wayland because it's unsupported, it really is, or yeah, pushing away from Xorg because it's unsupportive, there still is a level of like corporate support for Xorg that is just not going to go away overnight.
Anyone else want to speak on their reasons for using Wayland, maybe? Go ahead, Arch Penguin. Raise a digital hand, Ryosha, next time you want to talk.
Yeah, so I really like how I can use multiple refresh rates without having a bunch of issues, or not working at all, I should say. That's basically that, and it just seems to work better in general for me lately. Quite a while it was quite buggy, of course, but recently it's been pretty good. Not really having too many problems with it at all.
John?
So I use two machines that I run Linux on, two laptops. Pop! OS, I don't think I had to enable it. I think it was on by default, but I just tried to look real quick, and it's pretty easy to get it turned on if it's not available. It depends on what version you're on. But Fedora, it's my main daily driver. That's one I use for my development and stuff. That's been the default. Wayland's been default for like 3 versions now, at least. So like it's been there for a long time for GNOME. So, and I haven't had over 3 different machines. Literally have not had any problems. So I know there's people, and I don't want to say, well, it works on my machine, but like, no, it's been pretty stable on Fedora. They've kicked out a lot of the issues as far as I can tell. So even in the forums, that kind of conversation has kind of moved away, for me at least, from what I can see. So if you haven't tried, Fedora and Pop might be, if you're having issues and you need to move, Fedora and Pop might be something worth looking into.
So the one thing that I've found is that there's a gigantic gulf between Wayland's readiness between the desktop environments and window managers. It's just a huge gulf. So like on GNOME and KDE, it works. Like I've been using GNOME for 2.5 weeks now, which is just, I'm not proud to admit it, but I'm here and whatever. And using Wayland the entire time, it works, and it's been great. Hyprland is a buggy piece of you know what, and it's just I part of that is because of the advanced nature of the development, that they just keep adding features upon features upon features, and I hear that they're going to do like an LTS release pretty soon. We'll see how that goes. But you have problems, and I think that the big thing about Wayland is that it does differ quite a bit on what hardware you're using it on. Because if I found that on my laptop, the Hyprland hardly had any problems at all, and the same version would have a lot of problems on a multi-monitor machine. Multi-monitors really do screw you up, though. I mean, as much as we talked about earlier how much I love multi-monitors, if you have multi-monitors, especially if they have multiple different I got to turn my notifications off. That's one good thing about GNOME. You can actually do that. If you have multiple monitors, especially with different resolutions, you're gonna have some problems. And Wayland solves some of the problems. Every time I ask this question, like, why do you use Wayland? Like Arch Penguin said, I have multiple resolutions, and this thing works really well. And on Xorg, it doesn't. That's the big one. Like that is the big user-facing one that people can just say, you know, this is the reason why I use Wayland is because, you know, I have multiple monitors and it works better than Xorg ever did. I don't know. Jerry, go ahead. You're gonna have to unmute yourself though, if you actually want to talk. Not big on the sign language. Okay. Anybody else? Okay. All right. So I should have prepared better for the Wayland thing. So who uses Wayland on? Okay, so nobody cares. Who uses Hyprland? Do you guys have D-Dubs, you use Hyprland. Your experience with it has been better than anybody else's that I know, right? You have to unmute yourself.
Can you unmute him, Matt? Is that something that you can do?
No, it just says ask to unmute. Gotta hit the microphone button there. All right. Ryosha, you wanted to go ahead and go, or are you driving again, man?
It's fine. I'm actually already at my location.
All right, don't want you to crash.
Oh, it's quite all right. Alaska's while we have psychopaths on the road, it's not as bad once you get a little further out. But I've been using Hyprland now for maybe about 3 or 4 months. First dynamic tiling compositor. I'm not going to call it a window manager because it is one. I get that, but like all the documentation and every other influencer that I watch on YouTube pretty much just calls it a compositor. But I've been using it for the last 4 months, jumping between Nobara and Arch, and I've had literally nothing negative as far as problems on my end with my Hyprland setup. I think I've actually posted a rice of it here in the Discord a couple of times as I've made progress on it. It's fantastic. Just nothing short of amazing, especially since, first experience with such a environment.
That's had a better experience than I have. D-Dubs, go ahead.
Okay, can you guys hear me now?
Yes. Excellent.
Yay! I don't know why, but the Logitech Blue microphone, I have to disconnect it and reconnect it.
Sounds like a USB problem.
Very well could be. But it happens on multiple systems. Right? So, yes, I've been using Hyprland for over a year, actually. So I've had a wide variety of experience with it. I think I'm somewhat fortunate. My hardware is pretty stable, pretty run-of-the-mill. Intels, AMDs, not running Nvidia. There absolutely have been periods of what was he thinking when he wrote this? But starting with about .36, things started to smooth out a little bit for Hyprland. Then, of course, he breaks it, and everybody's got to catch up. But .40, which is what's out now, is now that the entire ecosystem is kind of settled out. The wallpaper and the cursors and the plugins and all the things are kind of, I won't say stable. Crashes. I haven't had, just weird display issues that some people do get. So I've been very, very, very happy with Hyprland and Wayland in general. I mean, for example, Wayland under Qtile doesn't seem to work very well.
It's still, I wouldn't say Qtile is early in its development in terms of Wayland because it's been around for a couple of years, but they don't have the ecosystem that Hyprland has. So they rely a lot on XWay tooling and WLRoots tooling. and I think that hampers them quite a bit because they have to wait for that stuff to be developed, and if they want features that will work in Qtile, they have to do it upstream and then pull it down. It's not like with that Vaxry does. Basically, Vaxry, who wants a feature, he doesn't wait for WLRoots to. He just goes and here's hypercursor, here's hyperpaper, here's whatever, and that's what he does, and that's great. But it also means that it's not as much a Hyprland seems like its own thing. Whereas the WLRoots is kind of, at least as far as I know, was kind of meant to spread around to multiple things. But I think
yeah. Now,
go ahead.
I'm sorry. Just so some people aren't aware, Vaxry posted on his blog a little while ago that he is going to, in part because of the fallout from the free desktop, he is going to rewrite WLRoots for Hyprland.
So it'll be its own thing. Okay.
And there's interesting sides to it, but his biggest complaint is it was written in C and poorly written in C and even more poorly documented. So he is looking at a complete rewrite.
What's he going to write it in?
I'd have to go back to the blog. I don't know if he actually mentioned it. I believe it's going to be C++.
Okay. Yeah, probably. C++ is what Hyprland's written in, yeah?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good thing for several reasons. One, if he can produce a better WLRoots, yay. But also it will prevent him from making a lot of other changes in Hyprland itself and let things kind of calm down a little bit and let some of the bugs in the modules that kind of get repaired and progressed.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the WLRoots developers seem to have a very GNOME way of doing things sometimes, where they're very much their own way of doing things, and if you don't do their way of doing things, they don't aren't very happy with it. So maybe a more free community-based version of WLRoots is what is needed. But
well, right, because he can't contribute code anymore to free desktop.
Yeah, because I saw that. I did not delve into that particular thing.
No, so I'm not either. I'm just saying, as a result of that situation.
So just real quickly, are anybody else having weird connection problems where it just basically says connection inactive on your end, or is that just me?
I think it's just you.
I see some camera feeds that come and go, but
yeah, it's just cameras keep flickering in and out. Maybe it's just something that
cameras going in and out. D-Dubs, like always, is freezing, and then there's a little you miss like 4 seconds of what he's saying, at least for me.
Yeah, his connection set up non-optimal, so that's gonna be an internet problem on his. Mine says green, so I shouldn't be having any issues. But again,
mine's been saying green.
Yeah, it's weird. This is why we didn't use Jitsi for the podcast, because we kept having these issues. Anyways, so let's turn it around the other direction. For those of you who are anti-Wayland, raise your hand and give us a talk about why you are anti-Wayland. John, go ahead.
I don't have any anti-Wayland comment, but I keep seeing Jerry on my screen. He keeps raising his physical hand.
I know, and I called on him.
I don't think you notice it. You got to raise a little digital hand, or else Matt will ignore you.
I did see it one time, and then he started doing some sign language. I think he's having some audio issues.
Do you know how to raise the physical hand or the digital hand?
I think he has some. There's something in chat. He's having some audio issues. I think is where we're going with that. War Thunder, why don't you go ahead and go? You're next. Don't forget to unmute yourself. There you go.
There we go. You guys hear me okay?
Yeah, a little bit of feedback, but that's okay.
Oh, that's okay. I can turn it down a little bit. No, I'm not so much anti-Wayland because, I know it's going to be a thing. That's not my concern about it. My concern is some of the workflows in that I've worked with. And to be fair, the last time I really dove into Wayland, I was running a GTX 1070, and that was a god-awful experience. That aside, I've played with Wayland on some other machines. Some of it is GNOME, I think, has a more stable implementation for me. I don't like GNOME, but that's a different conversation altogether. But I've had a lot of issues with Plasma. Okay, Plasma being Plasma about things, but I've had weird portal issues. I've had one of the big issues is I have multiple systems, including the one I'm on tonight, that have dual graphics cards, and I don't know what other people's experiences are, but Wayland and multiple graphics cards seems to be a very weird, stuttery mess. Like a lot of apps just don't launch correctly or don't move onto the right GPU, or I've literally had times where right clicking and launching as discrete graphics, I just don't have the option in Wayland, whereas I do on X. So some weird stuff like that. And there are some other neat things too. Like as an example, for whatever reason, Novu works really well via Wayland of all things, and that's actually the driver I'm on tonight with this thing. I'm on X, but I watched a video from Action Retro where he was using Ubuntu with a Mac that had an Nvidia card in it, and Novu was working really well of all things on Wayland. He had some graphical glitches, but I mean that's Novu for you. But yeah, for the most part, I've just had some stability problems and whatnot with it where my system would crash. And again, that's probably KWin being KWin. You know, I don't entirely understand all of the graphic stack and whatnot, but for the most part, I'd say it will get there someday. But I still have a lot of older hardware that doesn't seem to be super compatible with it. Like my newer stuff seems okay. A lot of the older hardware seems to struggle sometimes, Wayland.
The Novo wave drivers seem to have really benefited from Nvidia open sourcing their blobs. I've noticed that in a little bit. Nate, go ahead. You're next. Sounds like some techno music, man. We can't hear you. All we hear is buzzing. Having some interesting electronic interference there. Josh, go ahead. You're next. We'll wait for Nate.
I just want to say that, hi guys, it's me. I'm back on Matt's channel again for the first time in how long?
Welcome, Josh.
Yeah. Also, Wayland is definitely worth trying if you haven't tried it yet, or if you haven't tried it in forever. You should just try Wayland. It will probably work a heck of a lot better than the last time you tried it. And also, X11 is still absolutely horrible on Intel Arc GPUs. But thankfully, I can actually it is a usable experience now. It's just not massively improved. It's just that I get a better frame rate on the desktop session using a Wayland compositor compared to XWorld.
I'm actually surprised that they did any work at all whatsoever on the Arc stuff on XOR. Or do you think it just started working due to chance?
I would assume that somebody that doesn't work for Intel decided they were going to start working on the X driver because they wanted to use their Intel Arc card with their anti-Wayland for some reason.
Yeah. Ryosha, go ahead.
Yeah. So as far as what was just said, forgot what I was actually going to say about it. So go ahead and skip me. I apologize.
Okay. So when I was completely anti-Wayland, one of the reasons why was because I always had problems with OBS, and I think that one of the reasons why everyone always looked at me funny when I was so blatantly anti-Wayland was because most people don't use OBS. And, you know, when you have those types of problems and you use OBS, you tend to be really anti-Wayland. But I think that a lot of problems I always had were because of, less because of Wayland and more because of a portal problem. It was always like Wayland itself has been stable for quite a long time, but portals seem to have some issues. Jerry, are you gonna finally get yourself settled and can talk?
I hope my microphone works now.
Excellent, we can hear you.
Looks good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had to switch to Windows because audio on NixOS. Well, what the fuck is going on?
If you were using a real distro like OpenSUSE, you wouldn't have any problems.
The funny part is with OBS, I have the exact opposite experience. On X11, it never worked, at least not with hardware acceleration. But on Wayland, it worked perfectly fine. It might be because my system doesn't play nice with X11 in general, but that's pretty funny because you had issues with OBS on Wayland because of the portals, and I had no issues on Wayland, but on X11.
It is interesting how different the experiences can be, and I think that shows just how hardware reliant your situation is in a lot of this stuff, because depending on what hardware you have, you could have a really good experience or a really bad one, and it doesn't even really need to be a wide ranging differences between hardware. Like you could just have you could have the same you could have the same model of GPU but just have different brands. Like you could both have a 6750 XT or whatever, but one of you have a Gigabyte and one of them has an MSI or whatever, and you can have a completely different experience. And it's one of the problems that Linux has had for literal decades is that there's just so much hardware out there that they have to support, and there's a reason why the whole Wi-Fi card thing happened for 20 years, because there was a million different Wi-Fi cards and they had to support every single one of them. And even to this day, they still have problems with Wi-Fi cards every once in a while. You know, so it's not at all surprising that this stuff just isn't consistent from person to person to person. It's one of the reasons why when I see like Traffiton, I think it's Traffiton is like really into the Wayland stuff, and Brody too. But Traffiton tends to make these comments like, if you don't use Wayland, you're just, you know, asking for security problems, or like blatantly completely anti-XORG, and says everyone should just use Wayland because it's ready and absolutely ready for everyone. And I was like, that's just not true. You can't say in a general thing that Wayland is for sure ready for everyone, because the hardware differences between people it does cause issues. Now it's ready for most people, probably, I'm ready to say that, but there's still some situations, older Nvidia cards, people who do rely on OBS, which does tend to have some issues with portals when it does an update. You know, it's not definitely ready for everyone. Nate, go ahead.
Can you all hear me now?
Yes, it's much better than last time.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know what happened. My plug fell on my mixer. So anyways, it's neither here nor there. So for me, in particular, what I was going to touch on is one of the biggest things, the reason why I don't switch to Wayland is because right now, yes, there is a lot of applications that are moving towards Wayland. And when it gets to that point, I'll be more than happy to switch. But until then, there are actually, like in my workflow, especially my IT workflow, there are applications that would break my business if I could not get them working on Wayland. And I can't right now. And the biggest problem I have is I have a GTX 1070, as you was talking about. It just does not work well with Wayland at all because the drivers are not being supported for that GPU. And that's the biggest issue I have right now, which is why I'm still on POP. Just to sneak in there.
Oh, is that that's the only reason you're on POP, is it? Okay. We're going to write that one down. Jerry, go ahead.
Well, then I have a question. Does XWayland not work for your applications? I mean, the GTX 1070, I know how bad the Nvidia driver works with Wayland, but the applications not working under XWayland is new for me.
Sadly, no. Not for what I do.
Isn't for XWayland, doesn't the application developer have to support XWayland for that to actually work? It's not just like automatic. Like
I think it
yes.
is.
It is automatic?
No. They have to support it.
Oh, and that'd be the reason why then.
Oh,
so
okay.
If that's the way XWayland should work, it should be the Rosetta thing for Mac, or the new thing that Microsoft just thing where it's basically emulating on ARM, but would be emulating X on Wayland. It should just be automatic. That way you don't, if you have to use an application that's like 15 years old and hasn't been updated in forever, it just automatically emulates it into the thing, and you'd be good to go. But that apparently is not the way it goes. D-Dubs, go ahead.
No, that's pretty much the way it goes. You don't have to rewrite apps, but that is not to say that XWayland is 100% compatible with every X application. I can foresee some that would not work, but generally speaking, you don't have to rewrite the app to be XWayland compatible. At that point, you might as well make it Wayland compatible.
Well, I didn't think that you had to rewrite it, but I assume you had to do something in terms of maintenance to actually make it XWayland compatible. So it's just like I could take I could take that 15-year-old piece of software and actually run it, and it would potentially work with XWayland without anything to do with it, or
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, an example, WesTerm was X based, and they started with some experimental Wayland support, broke it, so you had to disable the Wayland support so it just runs straight X, as it did before, and it runs fine. It just runs under XWayland.
Now that you mention it, though, now that I think about it, Tilix itself, Tilix is a great terminal emulator, but it does not support Wayland, and it hasn't been. It's in maintenance mode basically. The guy's still around, but he doesn't do any major features, and it works fine in Wayland. So that's almost certainly using XWayland. Now that I think about it, so yeah.
Like I say, there are so many, older apps and custom apps that could be calling for libraries or functions that were not included. So absolutely, I could see, and I've heard of XWayland not having perfect compatibility.
I would assume, again, me and Matt and his assumptions, but it would make sense to me that one of the big groupings of applications that wouldn't be easy to kind of be an automatic support for XWayland would be something that would rely on the way portals work, right? If it relies excessively on the way portals work, it probably wouldn't do well with XWayland. Would that be D-Dubs? You seem to be the Wayland expert, so I'm asking you.
I haven't delved honestly that deeply into how XWayland handles that. I just, from what I've kind of seen and what I've read about people, saying, "Oh, I'm having a problem with this or that X app." Or it's not run. Usually, it's not doesn't run. It usually has weird video effects, or is stuttery, or it's not smooth. Things like that. And the response is usually, "Yeah, that's a bug," or that's an XWayland. I've just based on what I've looked at older stuff. Like you mentioned Tilix. I was thinking of some of the other ones. The same thing where they just run.
Yeah. Okay, Jerry, you're next, but before you do, you have to answer a question from the chat. They want to know if you're actually drinking maple syrup or if you're drinking something different.
No, it's standard Coke.
Okay. They were pretty sure that it was maple syrup. Go ahead with what you're saying.
With the bottle that has a handle.
That's awesome.
And because of the point D-Dubs brought up, I thought the apps just run like normal under XWayland, because what XWayland is it's essentially an X server that runs on Wayland, and that's why I thought just run it and you're good.
Yeah.
But okay, learn something new today.
Nate, go ahead.
I was going to say, I've got a few Java apps that say that they support Wayland and it will work with XWayland, but they don't. I have two of them that simply refuses to launch. I don't know why.
I think that your mistake is using Java apps. I'm just
work sort of requires it, so there's no way around this.
yeah, I know. Josh, go ahead.
Okay, well, I was going to say something else, but first of all, hi, Jorge Castro. This is yet another place where I can come into disagreements with you on. And Nate, so is Java compiled with Wayland support? Because if it's not, then that's why things aren't working.
It's a good possibility it's not, because it's specific apps that's related to my work.
Yeah, and I'm talking about the Java runtime itself, not the apps. So like the system library of Java.
I'd have to go check.
Which, by the way, most distros do not compile Java with proper Wayland support.
D-Dubs, go ahead.
Yeah, I just did a quick little read up. XWayland is an application layer. So, it's definitely not like an X server running in the background that just, so it even says they're not even aiming basically for 100% compatibility. So there's definitely stuff that will not work on it. For example, they gave the example of you can't run like an X window manager inside of a Wayland session.
Brody did something on that, where he was talking about there's a lot of stuff you could run in XWayland, but because of the way something or the other works, you couldn't get to work with like multi-monitor or something like that. It was weird.
I mean, I can elaborate on that.
Go ahead, Josh, then.
Okay, so the way that XWayland works is that basically all XWayland is it's a mock Wayland server, but realistically, what we're wanting to talk about is the X11 protocols itself. That's what the Xorg server actually manages and distributes is a set of protocols, in a much more complicated way than what Wayland does. But all XWayland does is it just enables these protocols to be called by applications, and that's how they open up, and then it translates that into a window that your compositor can then manage. Now, the reason why a lot of these full screen applications don't work is because XWayland doesn't know the actual size of your screen, so it can't draw a full screen. And the way that X11 works is it indexes your monitor's hardware to tell it what is the maximum resolution that the screen supports. That way, I can just draw a window over all that. Well, XWayland can't know that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Dennis, go ahead.
If it was me, and I was a little bit more
having some
in that area of programming,
having some audio issues there, Dennis.
Both binaries work. Can you hear me okay? Yeah.
Barely hear you. Well, we can hear you, but you're sounding like you're running in slow
gain's way high.
motion. Yeah, you're probably gonna want to turn your mic down first. Perils of Linux audio.
Yeah. What Jerry is saying there, yes, you can get X11 window managers running inside that. You just need to be able to draw your root window to draw the window manager, which you can do with XWayland.
Can confirm I actually tried it out after watching Brody's video on it, and it actually runs just as if I launched an awesome window manager session. It ran basically perfectly, minus the issue that I didn't have the ability to have dual monitors. If that would be possible, I think I would just set up a Wavefire session that immediately launches 2 XWayland screens and use Awesome Window Manager again, just without the drawbacks that X11 brings on my system.
Isn't that reminds me of that thing that it starts with a Z, like Zephyr or something like that. It's linked to on the Qtel docs, where you can basically test an Xorg session within an Xorg session, which is what all this reminds me of, is that it's kind of embedded. And I don't know why I thought about that. The interesting thing about Wayland for me, since I've kind of turned around on it, has been just the varying different experiences that I've had on it depending on what I've been using. So, Hyprland has problems with OBS. With GNOME, it's been actually really, really stable. With KDE, I have problems with monitors going to sleep and then not turning back on for some reason. Now, I don't know if that's a Wayland issue. I can't tell you where these bugs are coming from or not, but a lot of that experience, it feels sometimes like I blame Wayland too much on this stuff. So, but I want to blame Wayland because I don't want. It feels like that's where I should place the blame, but no, I think that a lot of times I'm being unfair when I say like, oh, Wayland's causing more problems. Like when Pipewire was really new, you blamed Pipewire for everything. Like even if it wasn't an audio problem, like there's Pipewire again, you know. So I don't know. I feel like sometimes I place blame on Wayland when I really shouldn't. Nate, go ahead.
Well, part of the issue too, and D-Dubs brought this up in Discord, and I really liked his take on it, was the fact if you really think about it, X11's been around for how long? And Wayland is relatively kind of new. So there's going to be growing pains. There always will be.
Well, we'll also have to consider that new on Linux doesn't really necessarily, because Wayland's actually been around for like 12, maybe 14 years. It's been around for a long time. But that doesn't mean all that much because it just takes a long time to develop this stuff when you're dealing with like 5 developers. War Thunder, go ahead.
I was going to say, having watched 1 or 2 documentaries on it, you also have to consider X11 was never originally designed to display more than text on a screen in its original, most simple form. And since then, we have continued to develop it and develop it and develop it to do all kinds of things it was never originally meant to do. So, yeah, I agree. Wayland's relatively young in the overall aspect of everything, so... And not everything will work because I do personally believe not everything X11 did, Wayland should do. I like this app does this job and it does this job very well kind of person.
You like the portals,
Not
okay?
necessarily the Army knife.
We got you. Ryoshi, go ahead.
Yeah, what I was about to say, Wayland, I remember seeing that first, like Ubuntu 12.04, I think. It was the first time I remember seeing Wayland, and that was kind of sort of the infection vector time frame for the initial Linux. So as far as I can remember, Wayland and Xorg have both kind of lived side by side for quite some time.
So the first release of Wayland was September 30th, 2008. So it's as old as, nearly as old as Ubuntu. Which is nuts. It's been around a long time. So yeah, it's definitely not new. D-Dubs, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. What I was talking about in that Discord was Hyprland is very new. It just turned 2. Wayland, yes, I should have said even then, the Wayland itself has been around, but until more recently, it hasn't really gained much traction or much development. But X has always been a graphical design, even because when MIT was putting it together, it was intended for graphics. It always has been. Just a little side note.
Yeah, I think the point was that the Xorg has kind of been molded into what it eventually became, and while it was for graphics in some ways, it was just for text or something like that. I don't. Brody did the whole history on it, which is beyond what I could have done. Nate, go ahead.
Well, it's actually just going back off of what D-Dubs was saying. The biggest thing that what I was talking about is Wayland recently has finally got corporate support. And what I mean is the industry is actually moving towards that. It's not always been that way, to be honest. Yes, there was some development on it, but not until recent years has it really been pushing and moving towards that way. A couple big things. One is Valve, because Valve's been helping to push Linux like crazy for their gaming consoles. And the biggest thing to me is I've seen a lot of audio people get interested in moving into Linux, which is amazing because we've all had audio issues tonight. Please come help fix us.
It can't be fixed. I'm sorry. I'm convinced at this point that Linux audio problems are a tradition that will never be solved. At least better than they used to be, but definitely not ever going to be perfect. But then anyone who's used Windows knows that audio on Windows is also not great. Arch Penguin, go ahead. You're gonna have to unmute yourself. There you go.
I just wanted to weigh in with audio. Don't get me started with jacks either. It is so terrible. I wish I could use Linux for audio, but I just can't. I have to use Mac, dude. It doesn't do the plugins. It just doesn't work, man. This is definitely something I would love for progress to be made. I mean, there are some better distros like Ubuntu Studio isn't too bad with the low latency Licorice kernel, and Arch on Zen actually works pretty decently with Reaper. But other than that, I mean, you can't really use third-party plugins at all. Basically, anything that's just doesn't work.
D-Dubs, go ahead.
Oh, it's just so funny. People talk about like audio problems and things. I go way back before Xorg was X386. And it's like you guys have no concept of what instability and difficult configuration and crashing and getting things to work is all about. It is just hilarious to me when I think about where that was. And the arguments and discussions that we're having today about going from X to Wayland is a complete reproduction of going from X386 to Xorg, because things had to be changed for that. It's just to me so funny how things come in these cycles. So I hope audio gets a lot better for Linux. I really do.
Nerdgasm Cody, go ahead.
A few things real quick. So audio in Windows, like it's absurd that all the way now in Windows 11 in 2024 here, it does not automatically set your audio devices to the highest quality. It sets it to one of the lower or mid qualities by default. Every time, both microphone, speakers, no matter what. And like the reasoning for that originally way back in the day was that systems couldn't quite handle 192 kilohertz audio all the time. It would be real strain on the processor to be doing that all the time. And like that is not a problem whatsoever anymore. And Windows still can't change that basic thing by default. So the first thing I have to do when I'm setting up Windows for anyone is go and just change that so their audio sounds slightly better, or they're just less likely to have a little audio quality problem in there. Ridiculous. When it comes to Wayland, like I'm still not using Wayland on my main machine, and I think it's because Nvidia. I have a 2060 Super I got from my brother for free a while ago, so I've just been rocking that. Can't afford to get another one, but I've got a Mac Mini, like 2010 Mac Mini, running Manjaro on the latest kernel, and it's running Wayland no problem. Been running it since KDE 5 on Wayland, no problem. Got another HP Omen computer with like I think a 6th gen Intel and an AMD RX 580, also been running Wayland no problem. I'll be happy when I can switch my main computer over to Wayland, but it's not a huge priority or anything. Just I'll keep testing it out every couple updates and see how it goes. So
yeah. Dennis, go ahead.
First of all, is the audio fixed, guys?
No, it's still not fixed. Are you coming through your webcam microphone by any chance? Because you sound like you're coming through a webcam microphone. And not a good one. I don't know if there are good ones, but that one's definitely not a good one.
Heavily bit crushed.
Yeah, it's not great. Nate, go ahead.
Well, I actually got a question for you. Funny enough, there are companies like Behringer and PreSonus that are trying to push audio into Linux. I've actually looked at PreSonus's application that's in beta. If this were to get better, would you be interested in actually even upgrading your audio to one of those type of mixers, or you just don't really care?
So I have a UA something or the other. It's about a $300 audio interface by Universal Audio, and it's okay, but you don't get any of the, like, I'm never going to get a firmware update on this thing because the software doesn't work, right? But I don't care because it works, right? It's not, there was never going to be any features that I really cared about anyways that would come through in a firmware update, but maybe it would depend on, you know, price and reasons why. Like right now this works well for me enough. I'm able to finagle it to work well consistently enough that I don't think that I need to upgrade, or at least the sane, rational, financially conservative part of me wants to say that, you know, I'm perfectly fine with what I have. The guy who wants to go spend some money on cool, new, awesome tech would say, yeah, I really want a brand new microphone. By the way, this is an SM7B. I don't need a new microphone, but I have, if you go to my Amazon wish list, I have at least 4 different microphones on there. And I'm not putting them on there like, oh, somebody buy those for me, but more like maybe in the future I would buy them. So I have an audio issue, but it's not as bad as my keyboard issue, which is debilitating. Nerdgasm, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll say that audio would probably get a lot better in Linux if more of the major music production applications actually moved over to Linux, like Ableton and stuff like that, because then those companies would be pushing hard for things to get sorted out, improved, more options and stuff like that. That way, not only their programs could work better in their natively, but that way the producers could also have the options they need to optimize their workflows and everything. So it's still sad that a lot of the stuff hasn't quite moved over. Although some of the native Linux music making programs have gotten a hell of a lot better, and the newer ones like Reaper are really kind of pushing some stuff forward in some ways. But it's really quite sad there. I was going to be pushing some of my music production friends. I used to run a small music production company in Boise, Idaho, years ago, but not anymore. But I was going to push some of them that run Ableton to throw Linux on, because some of the Ableton 11 was gold rated on WineHQ. Unfortunately, Ableton 12 only bronze rated so far. Not doing super well on that. Yeah, unfortunate, but yeah, is what it is.
It's those specific tools that holds Linux back in a lot of ways, and music production is a big area. CAD is another one,
and it's not just those tools themselves. It's what those tools need and what those tools push forward that then gets developers to improve the back end systems for those tools as well.
What surprises me is that video stuff like Blender and OBS and like even DaVinci Resolve in some cases, depending on what distro you're using and what hardware you have, can work really well on Linux. So the video stuff has kind of come along in some ways. Now, obviously, Adobe's still absent and probably will forever be, but that stuff has come along. But the audio stuff is kind of slack behind. You'd think that a lot of because there's a lot of companies that use Blender that do use it on Linux, and you'd think that they'd also want their audio tools also on Linux and not have to have Windows boxes around as well. Maybe it's just not as big of a, maybe they just probably using, a lot of them just use Blender on Windows anyways. But Ryoshia, go ahead.
Yeah. Hey, Matt, what type of keyboard are you using right now? Are you still using like a membrane, or do you got something mechanical at the very least?
Oh, we don't need to. I haven't had a membrane keyboard in 30 years.
Okay. Okay. Just wanted to make sure that wasn't the problem.
Right now, I have a Keychron Q10 in front of me, a pre-built. I have a KBD 75 on the desk behind me, which I built myself. And then I have probably 4 or 5 different customs that are probably in this room with me. And then I have probably about 4,000 or 5,000 different switches in bags and stuff around my house. So
mad respect. I just curious because you were from the way you said that, it just made me kind of think that you were still rocking one of those membrane keyboards that we were rocking back in 20, 30 years ago.
No, I would.
That's all.
I'd actually would like one of those old IBM membrane keyboards, but they're quite pricey. The remakes are quite pricey. Nate, go ahead.
I was gonna say, back to the audio thing. Besides recording studios, I think that it's going to get better if two things happen. For one, I know not everybody's a Christian, but if you get churches involved with production, that will be a huge thing. Secondly, gamers, because a lot of them are streamers and they want their audio to work.
Can I add a third one? Schools.
Yes.
Like
yeah. Schools. Yeah.
Yeah. That'd be big. It's just schools aren't going to. Linux requires a lot of IT overhead in some cases, and I don't think. I think that one of the reasons why the Chromebooks are so popular and even the Microsoft ecosystem is a lot of the IT administration stuff goes and gets burned on Microsoft and Google. Also, the Google and Microsoft certifications for IT guys are much more prevalent, or at least for the micro, like big servers. Yeah, Linux stuff is big, and network stuff is big but for small, it feels like the Microsoft and stuff is more mainstream. Nerdgasm, go ahead.
Yeah, I definitely agree on all those points. Getting all those different sections, if they could switch over, it would push things forward quite a bit. Like that's definitely, especially in the audio space, like churches I know are huge on that. I am very not religious, I'll just say that, but I've definitely been in and worked with a lot of people in churches and audio and stuff like that, and they have to do a lot more complicated stuff, and most of the time they don't have things recorded or they have things improperly recorded just because there's the complexity of all the mismatched stuff that they have, and it doesn't even work great on Windows or Mac or whatever they're using to begin with. But so trying to get it though to work on Linux and have it be wonderful would be incredibly difficult, probably a huge hill to climb. But if that could be done, then it would push everything so much more forward and push Linux into the mainstream a lot more. Just to reply to a couple of the chat parts in there, Ardor and Reaper. Ardor is cool. I've used it a number of times. It does a lot of great stuff. Not quite as powerful last I used it as something like Ableton. Reaper is also amazing, like especially if you're not needing to do really complicated stuff. It still doesn't quite hold up to something like Ableton in full, but for most people, 90% of people, Reaper, if you're going to pay for a music program on Windows, Mac, and Linux, Reaper is probably the way to go. I have Bitwig Studio 1.0 box copy of it. It was really fun, really great. I haven't checked out the newer versions of it. Would love to see what they've done and pushed it forward. But I forgot the other stuff I was going to say, so I'll let other people talk.
Jerry, go ahead.
Yeah, I also totally agree on schools because my school actually wanted to move our computers over to Linux because they were all Core 2 Duos. Windows 7 got kind of old and they really didn't run good with Windows 10. But the reason that they didn't do it and bought new computers instead to be able to run Windows 10 comfortably was because the server was running Debian, and for some weird reason they had so many issues with it. I don't know how many times they needed to get me out of class to help them fix the stupid server, and that's probably also a big blocker for schools to move their computers over to Linux because most of the time it's stable, but when it breaks, it breaks.
Yeah. Josh, go ahead.
Okay, so I would like to push back to when we were talking about like people switching to Linux not being a good idea. Somebody mentioned game streamers. What video Okay, so when you're recording a game application, what special sauce audio bullcrap are you guys using to capture the game audio? Because Linux capturing like a game's audio in a separate channel can just be done through OBS. So it's like, why? What? Somebody explain this to me, please.
Nate, you were the one that said that, I think.
Yeah, so the whole point about the audio is not about the game. It's about the mixers that they use. In particular, there's certain software that is not available on Linux. But if you have gamers and streamers move,
you're talking about the fancy software controlled mixers like the stream.
Yes,
not the Stream Deck, but like the TC
Ropo
Helicon thing.
Podcaster. Yeah, all that stuff.
So
the reason why that's important is because if you can get the streamers to move towards Linux, then you will actually start seeing that software be like, oh, now it's available. And then there'll be more support, which would be a great thing for us.
So the company to do this, if you're talking about gaming, is blatantly obvious. Valve. If Valve took an interest in Wayland and Wayland in terms of gaming got way better. You know, if they did the same thing for audio, it would quickly get better. Jerry, you're next.
And also the mixer that the streamers use is a big issue because I don't know about any American streamers, but pretty much every German streamer uses that stupid Go XLR that doesn't work on Linux at all.
Yeah,
it does.
And
Josh, it does, but it's very, very fucking hacky. Like very hacky.
Yeah, you can get it to work, but it definitely won't work as well as
it works pretty well for me.
Anything made by Elgato is hacky.
It's not made by Elgato, it's made by TC Helicon.
It's the Elgato. Never mind. The Stream Deck, for example, is hacky and shit. And there is actually a new program that I need to try that's actually a GUI that's supposedly better for it, but the Deck Master was really, really bad. Happy to have it, but man, did that thing have a memory leak like the size of fucking Texas. Nerdgasm, go ahead.
Yeah, so with the streamer thing, it's definitely the hardware. That's the thing. The hardware and the software that connects it and controls it. That's definitely what holds it back. Absolutely. And the same goes for audio production stuff as well, because some of the stuff gets really complicated. I have a fantastic Liquid Sapphire 56 input device that is considered legacy these days, but still does everything at all the qualities that are that are expected. Does 32-bit audio, 256K, like everything like that. On Linux, I can get it detected. I can get some input, but I can't switch modes on it. I can't multi-input a bunch of stuff. It's just, it's effectively useless. It's quite sad. So I have an old MacBook that has FireWire Type B on it, so I can get maximum output. And I just switch back to Mac OS on that to run the old software on it when I need to record something with one of my good microphones or something like that. It's ridiculous. Schools, that's definitely something I wanted to touch on. Yeah, schools are a complicated situation. The biggest problem with schools in a lot of these places that need to have low maintenance, low overhead, is that it's the long term. That's the problem. They can get certain distros and stuff working and running really well for a couple months, maybe a year. But when they come to the point where there's certain vulnerabilities they need to upgrade for, or they need to do a big version upgrade or this or that, that's where they start running into big problems. And it starts creating a whole bunch of problems all at once. And that's what they get overwhelmed with. And then they go, nope, we're switching back. Things like Chrome OS, it just works. It updates. It's seamless. It's unfortunately just the low overhead, easy solution, and that's what's going to keep them coming back to it. And on that topic, like I have a friend who's extremely tech literate, but he just gets emotional and flip-flops and stuff sometimes. He loves Linux. He's been pushing for it for years, but he just got super angry because he wasn't reading the release notes for the big updates in Manjaro. And so then the person he was taking care of their computer crashed big. I don't know if it was the Plymouth downgrade that was needed or if it was the KD6 upgrade or whatever, but he was all pissed off. Oh, Manjaro broke this and that, blah, blah, blah. And he was trying to say that it's supposed to be set and forget. And it's like, no, like, no Arch-based distribution is set and forget. And like the fact that you were thinking that to begin with is a perception. Like, you're in the wrong here. You didn't do the steps you needed to do, and yet you're blaming the solution that had clearly defined terms and instructions. It's just kind of ridiculous. But you tend to get that sort of stuff a lot in different environments when it comes to business and schools, that sort of stuff.
Just real quick before you go, Rashid, on the school thing, there's just obviously the big thing here is money, right? Schools don't have just loads and loads of cash that they can throw at a problem, but the ideal thing is they have a lot of student labor that they could put into this, and trust, as someone who may have gone to school 20 years ago, but I remember some things that there were a lot of nerds, just happened to be one of them in school. Create yourself a club that manages your servers. But what you do is you have, for a while, you just keep what you have that you know works, and then you have your Linux servers that's eventually going to take over. But you have your students run that stuff and learn it. And once they know how to do that stuff, they pass that knowledge on to the lower years so that the kids coming up into the club for the next year would know how to do it. The problem, of course, is that, first off, it has to be popular enough, so you have to have a steady stream of nerds and that are willing to do this. But also, you know, if they do have problems there, you're going to need at least one competent and knowledgeable adult in case, so that the knowledge that is there, you know, it doesn't get lost if, you know, there's a gap in years where there's just not enough people to run it or whatever. So that, you know, there's obviously things that have problems, and you don't face those kind of problems with Chrome OS, which is managed mostly by automated software in Google. Ryoshi,
One more thing on the school thing. I just wanted to say there's another problem when it comes to keeping the old hardware sometimes, because just because the whole old hardware could totally run Linux, no problem, things would be smooth and everything. Sometimes there are hardware vulnerabilities that, although mitigations can be put in place through firmware and software, they are required sometimes by law to replace the hardware after a certain amount of time, because, well, let's face it, those machines are physically accessible. You can, in software, disable USB ports all day long, but if there's a hardware way to get around that, kids are going to do that. Bad actors are going to do that.
They
so unfortunately,
literally
as much
glued
as we
the
want
USB things even 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Ryoshi, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm a gamer, right? I'm not a streamer. I do like to record my gameplay from time to time. I do not have any super fancy Go XLR thing. I do. It's mainly for hobbyist reasons and to be able to be like, hey, people, look what I did. But gaming on Linux was that was the barrier original for the permanent switch over. Was I wouldn't have been able to play any of my games, and it got to the point with Proton back in like 2018, 2017, I think, maybe a little bit after that. But when Proton finally hit, I was like that. I was like, it's time, guys. I'm leaving Windows, and literally haven't looked back since permanently. Like not nary a partition to be seen on my system. And schools, like, those bad actors. I was actually one of those bad actors in my high school class. Actually, it got bad enough that I actually was just eventually given admin access. And since my small town didn't really have too many IT people, I was expected as sort of punishment to sort of keep that shit up. I apologize for the profanity. I just noticed that.
No worries. I swore to.
But it was up to me and the one server guy in high school, the one actual IT guy in high school, like professional, to keep the stuff working in school. And I tell you what, that's life skills that I'm still putting to use to this day, so I'm very grateful for that.
Nate?
I got a question. This will be for everybody. Let's say in the future that Wayland works out. Now you have full support for high refresh rate monitors. Your Nvidia drivers somehow miraculously work. AMD's kicking butt with their GPUs because they always do with Linux. Intel Arc has all their drivers issue fixed. Now you have audio production moving into Linux. You're getting better audio support. Streamers are moving in, more gamers. In that particular world, why would there ever be a reason to ever run Mac OS or Windows?
Hardware for
Because
Mac
it
OS.
came with the hardware.
And
Okay.
because of Adobe.
Well,
Because
see, no, okay, hold on. Sorry. Adobe's not a good argument because you do have Kdenlive, which I know it doesn't compare, but Final Cut is going to be your biggest competition, to be honest, versus Adobe.
Well, the thing is, a lot of YouTubers, a lot of streamers, and so on, they rely on Premiere Pro. They don't want to use anything else but Premiere Pro, and that's a big blocker. As long as Adobe doesn't support Linux, yeah.
Also, Nate, you and I know a lot about editing, and we've talked about this before, but Kdenlive has a stability problem. Not that it's not stable, but every once in a while, like once a year or so, they'll push an update out there that just eats something. You know, it's just, for whatever reason, there's like a gigantic hole in their code, and it either crashes the thing, or recently it just completely slowed down rendering times. Like, for whatever reason, the latest version completely just annihilated rendering times on every PC. Nobody knows why. And I think that until you can say, you know, this thing is going to work 100% of the time and it's feature for feature, you're gonna have some problems. Nerdgasm, you're actually next.
Okay, so about the question to begin with, there is the main reason, at least in the United States, that other things can't quite push in nearly as much is the money thing. Apple and Microsoft and Google donate and spend tons of money to make sure those devices, those softwares are the ones being used. Adobe as well when it comes to colleges and tech schools and stuff like that. They're giving the incentive to stick with them. And like, yeah, they could go with all these other things. Other things would totally work fine, but they're coming to me. They're giving me money. They're giving me free stuff in order to use it. And so absolutely, they're going to go that route. Just is what it is. Also, like I was a troublemaker when it came to the computers in school, running proxies, doing stupid stuff I shouldn't be able to, access folders, all that stuff. But my school did not handle it well. I got suspended. I got banned from the library. I asked if there could be some way for a positive output on this sort of stuff, and they wouldn't give it to me. Like ultimately, I ended up dropping out halfway through my senior year. One of the best and worst choices I've ever made in my life.
Arch Penguin, you're next.
Yeah, so I kind of already said this once, but I'll reiterate. The reason you have to use those is because plugins do not work on Linux, period. I mean, some of them do if they're native to Linux. Like Reaper comes with a bunch of plugins built in that work fine. But if you want to use Nero DSP, you're not going to unless you do a bunch of hackery, in which case you might waste one of your activations and then cost you, and you have to rebuy the plugin again, because that's kind of the way they have so much DRM and anti-piracy stuff that you have to install. It just doesn't work. And anything good in the audio protection scene comes with that stuff. You have to do it. Otherwise, it doesn't work.
All right, Nate, go ahead.
Okay, so back to the original question. It's not the fact that what the problems we have today. I'm saying if there was support and there was a back end that everything worked just fine, your plugins worked, your screen recording worked, everything else worked just fine. The question would be, why would there be a legitimate reason besides money, which I know that's a big thing? Why would anybody legitimately ever suggest Windows or Microsoft?
Hardware.
Not even hardware, because there will be ARM.
Well, okay. whether you like it or not, people buy Mac computers. A lot of the reasons, not because of how awesome Mac OS is, but because of how awesome the hardware is. And I guess if in your perfect world Linux also works awesome on ARM, then yeah, maybe there's a reason to ask the question, and then you would have your doubts why people would ask. But as it is, or even in that world, you'd have some doubts. Also, if the perfect world for Linux existence actually happened, I think that would push Mac and Windows to actually be better. I don't know. Jerry, go ahead.
And also because people are used to either Mac OS or Windows. Because I had this discussion with my grandpa the other day. What if Windows or what if Microsoft decides to just abandon Windows completely? We all know that won't happen, but what if? And he said, I won't be switching to anything other than Windows. If Microsoft kills off Windows, I won't be touching any computer ever again. And well, that's also a thing that we have to keep in mind. Not everyone is willing to switch to a different operating system.
True. All right. Let's go ahead and get away from this. George, are you listening? Do you want to do your composable distro thing now? We can move on to that topic if you want. If you're not listening, there you are.
I'm here. I was just hanging out.
All right, man. All right. So tell me,
do you have questions? It sounds like you got a lot of questions.
What is, I'm gonna go broad first. What is a composable distro? Explain it to me, please.
All right. So explain to me how you heard this term and how you ended up in this position.
Okay. Yeah, I blame the late night Linux guys. Everything's Joe Ressington's fault.
Okay. Yeah, I agree.
They did a whole podcast on where they see Linux in 10 years. And
I remember that one.
They talked about composable distros. I was like, what the is a composable distro? Like, I understood the term immutable. I know Fedora made some changes to their naming schemes. I understood the reasons behind that and stuff like that. But I'd never heard the word composable. And even when I went and did like a Google search for composable, there's no no documentation out there besides like one random mention on a uBlue site that said composable, and it had nothing to do with any of the other stuff, right?
I probably wrote that too.
All right, so there's nothing explaining it. So that's how I got there. It's like they said that was going to be all composable distros. I was like, what's a composable distro? I still don't know.
Hold on, give me a second to look something up real quick.
All right.
Okay, continue. I don't know. Do the rant you were doing the other day. That was good.
Okay. Well, my whole point was behind it was just that things seem. I'm a cranky old man. Like I even put it in the thumbnail as the cranky old man.
I saw it.
Just like things are moving too fast for me, and I just barely got my head around immutable distros somewhat, and then only in terms of like Fedora, because OpenSUSE is doing its own thing and it's not quite the same. And then you got Nix, which is immutable but also not immutable, and and they're doing their own thing, and everyone's doing their own things, and now they're all calling it something different. And like, it is composable going to be something that's going to be like an umbrella term? Like I didn't know.
Why do you feel the need to lump them all together? Like,
well, I don't.
Why would you lump Fedora and OpenSUSE in the same?
Well, I mean, I think part of it is.
This is a loaded question.
Laziness in some ways, because I want to be able to. I want them to be the same. I think some of it is pure jealousy over the fact that Fedora seems to be so far ahead in terms of the immutable stuff, and OpenSUSE is still very much. In the name changing position where they can't really even consider what their name is before they so some of it's that, but also it's just I had such a hard time with the immutable stuff, getting my head around a user facing reason for it.
Sure.
That once I did eventually get there, it seemed to have changed. Maybe it didn't actually change, and maybe it was just the late night Linux guys confusing the hell out of this old guy. So
yeah, because they're British.
You muted yourself there.
Yeah, you're British. You got to be careful. Sorry.
Yeah.
Is my mic okay? I'm on my backup mic, so
you're fine. You just must have a mute button there somewhere.
Yeah, sorry about that. Okay. So why I'm going to ask you some leading questions, and it might be a trap. Okay.
Okay.
So we'll see if you can see the trap. Why do you feel the need to explain them to this level of detail? Right? Like if the intent is to make it more transparent to you, you know what I mean? Like you keep using the term immutable distribution. Like how did you end up realizing that was a thing, right? Because we're trying to not make it a thing.
Well, originally that's what they all claimed themselves to be, right? At the very beginning. And when someone uses a term for something, I tend to latch onto it and then keep it until forever.
Yeah. Because I went and looked, and you used uBlue 10 months ago, or at least you made a video about it 10 months ago. So you've used these before. So what's tripping you up the most, I guess? Like let's say we're hanging out, right? And you're like, dude, you should try this Linux. And then I tell you, like, are you looking for like the elevator pitch? Like how you would explain this to a normal person? Or
so I think I understand, like, if the use cases for like a large enterprise to be able to have complete duplication between everything. I'm missing the word there that you guys use. The
reproducibility.
Reproducibility.
That's the word.
R? Okay, that's the word that I was looking for. Went completely blank there. I understand, like, if you have a whole bunch of computers and you want to reproduce it, like that's one of the things that the Nix guys always say is like, well, you can take this thing and put it on as many computers you want. It's going to be exactly the same, right?
Yeah.
So I understand.
And then you're like, hey, wait a minute, I've been doing that since 1997.
Well, yeah, but also part of my reason is that, like, I run a YouTube channel for what I consider noobs, right? And I try to phrase everything that I do for that audience. And I think that when it came to Immutable, I had a really hard time saying, this is why you would want this thing. This is why it's good. Because you know, like you hear some of the elevator pitch of Immutable Distros is that, you know, it's more secure, it's containerized, it's easy to reproduce, you know, snapshots and all of the stuff that's, you know, the buzzwords that's kind of float around those things. And a lot of the, I'm not saying any of those things are bad. They're all really, really good. It's just really hard to take those things and say, this is why random Windows users who are switching to Linux would want those things, right?
Right. So it's very interesting because I've been listening to the conversation this entire time and barely understanding anything that you all are talking about, because I switched to Wayland so long ago. I'm like rediscovering all these problems that you all have. It's just simple, right? It's the only Linux clients that have been successful, right, in the mass market aren't traditional Linux distributions, because traditional Linux distributions aren't designed for normal people. They're designed for Linux nerds. So, like, the model that we have now, the Georgisms are going to spill out a little bit here, right? So, like, if you had Richard from OpenSUSE, he'd tell you some different shit, right? So, but the way the model works is you design the Linux to match you want the traditional Linux distribution stuff, right? But you like that someone just mentioned that you can give someone a Chromebook, right? And then they don't have to care about it anymore, right? You can't do that with a normal distribution. They'd break it, right? We've all been there, right? It's like, all right, I'm coming home from college. I'm going to set up my dad's laptop, and then let's hope he doesn't break it until I get back, right? And you can't do that with traditional package-based Linux. So when you were talking about all the things, explain it all together, this is what's happening to Linux desktop now is a generational shift from how it was consumed before, right? Like Flatpaks, Wayland, image-based Linux distros, it's all the same transition. It's not like they all are interdependent on each other, right? Like, and when you're only consuming things that aren't designed to work together, you end up with the traditional Linux desktop, right? Which is not good for most people, right? But it sucks that I could buy a $200 Chromebook and the thing like runs awesome, other than I don't like the distro that's on it, right? So what we're striving to do is saying, all right, let's just rip off the Band-Aid and just start with, what if we were design and run our Linuxes in a way that's more modern, the way that other Linuxes have been successful with. So you take the cloud pattern, you take the mobile pattern, the whole appliance pattern, right? And then we just run our desktops that way, you know? So like, I don't have upgrade issues. Like I always just have my stuff. I have whatever package I want, right? But I don't have to worry about a package upgrade or third-party PPAs or any of the stuff that I hate about Linux. I haven't had to deal with anymore. But in order to get there, you got to give up a bunch of stuff that you're kind of used to doing with traditional Linuxes, which no longer really make like a lot of sense anymore, right?
So just a second.
I know I just threw a lot at you.
Yeah, that's fine. I know Nerdgasm, did you have a question about this, or did you want to?
Yeah,
I'm
very on
hanging out.
topic.
You all got questions. Let's...
Okay, so I've actually been going a little bit crazy wanting to ask you about this since that video. But the base thing is, aren't you conflating all of these things together? Like, immutable does not mean that whole bullet list of things that you said. Those are just a bunch of extra features that we tend to see on distributions that are immutable. But the core of what immutable means is not capable or susceptible to change. And so an immutable Linux is, at its core, just one that the system itself does not change. So you tend to see a lot of different ways that can happen. Image-based AB sort of things is how a lot of them have gone. But that's the core of it. All these extra features and all these other functions are not necessary to the immutable part. They're just different things that are overlap between composable and immutable.
George?
Yeah, that's why I don't use the term immutable.
What do you use?
The only thing that's immutable is the deployment artifact. But of course it is, right?
So you just call this Linux. This is just Linux U, and that's
I just call it Linux, man.
Okay, that's good to know. But I think that the reason why I'm so attached to the term is because it feels different. They feel different to me, right? And if something's different, it needs a term. And also, it's not like I coined the word immutable distro. Like
and also you're doomed, right? You're a content creator. You're gonna have to explain this shit no matter what.
Yeah, I mean, I've made 2 videos attempting to explain what an immutable distro is. I'm pretty sure I got it wrong both times.
No, I watched them both. You've evolved.
Well,
I've been watching you, Matthew.
I try to start to understand this stuff, and the way that I always felt with immutable stuff, like the second one, I had used Silverblue for longer that second time, and I was able to understand it a little bit more in terms of a user perspective, like why this is good. And even since then, I have evolved a little bit more into terms of like, I'm no longer a distro hopper. I don't distro hop. I found OpenSUSE. It's my distro. It's one I really like. And I'm keeping an eye on MicroOS or whatever the hell they're calling it now.
Yeah.
And I'm very fascinating about it, but I'm very worried about their package management strategy because they decided to do something new. And new scares me. Like
but they got some cool stuff. Did you see what Richard tweeted about the new features in the installer and stuff?
I have the tweet saved. I have barely glazed over it,
all right.
though.
Yeah, you might want to do a video on the shit he's talking about. It looks pretty dope.
I know they got a lot of really cool plans with, what is it? It's like ALP or ASP, something like that. Where
I gotta find out. I don't know anything about that stuff.
That's like going to be the future of Leap. Like it's going to be the future of Leap, right? It's going to be this thing, and they have grand plans, and it sounds amazing. But as someone who no longer wants to be a distro hopper, like I want the thing that I'm using now to be the thing, and the new stuff scares me a little bit. But also, I feel like in the last, I've been making content since 2020, and since then, I've really delved deep into, and I've been using Linux full time since 2017. So it's not been a long time. I used Linux really early in the early 2000s. It wasn't really for me, and then came back and use it full time now. And it just feels like in the last 2 or 3 years, this stuff has been transitioning so fast. It's really hard to keep up with, and I think it's exclusively a content creator thing. It's like it's really hard for me to understand it myself, let alone try to explain it to other people, like why this thing is good. And the whole cloud stuff that goes on to like like you tried to explain to me like a year ago how to build my own UBlue image with like a window manager. Never got
Yeah.
there around it to it, and the few minutes I put maybe like an hour into trying to figure it out, all the documentation, which documentation is really good, my brain just didn't get wrapped around like how to do it. And I think that one of the things that I like about Linux so much is just like if I want to go try like random window manager that no one's ever heard of, I can do that. If I can get it to build, I can do that, right? And if at one point I was like, well, people tell me that you can't write anything to the root file system on an immutable distro, which turns out is not actually true. You can do that. But the whole FUD, like when immutable first became a thing, was like, oh, you can't do anything that you want to do. Like they're taking away your freedom.
People still say that, by the way.
Yeah,
people are like, you can't change your wallpaper. I was like, I don't know, man.
Like, if you want to go delete your Etsy folder, you can in fact do that on Silverblue. You can if you want to. I mean, it wouldn't last very long.
Shred your boot directory. You
Yeah,
can absolutely shred that.
Like it wouldn't last very long, but the thing about it is like you could easily go back. like if you want, you could do that and just go back if you wanted to. But the whole FUD there at the beginning really got into my mind. And I think
because people did the Linux thing and they're like, oh no, something new, I hate it.
Yeah, like I did the same thing with Wayland though. Like, oh no, it's new, I don't like it. So I think that's part of the reason why I've had such a hard time with it, and because it's just moving so fast and things are different, and I'm a cranky 40-year-old who apparently is in his 80s.
Here's how I do it, right? Like my thing is Fedora. It's like 99% Fedora, right? I'm using Fedora, but like George came over to your house and he gave you the hookup, right? Like I installed your codecs and shit. I did all that stuff. But when I'm using my computer, I'm using it. I'm just not using it the way a normal distro person expects, right? So the concept of a system package manager is something that we just kind of remove, right? Is I don't really care about the individual components of my quote unquote distro, right? Like for me, I need a GNOME desktop, a good kernel, and reasonable package, right? All the other stuff I get from somewhere else, right? So I either get it from Homebrew or I get it from FlatHub, right? So for me, the reason that people picked distributions when I was growing up was which one had the biggest package repos, right? And at the time that was Ubuntu, then Debian, right? And then all the Arch kids found the AUR, and that's what they all use now, right? Whereas these days in this model, it's different. I'm choosing Fedora to give me a base operating system, right? And because there's a container runtime, it means I can run actually whatever I want. So a more distro box native way might be a way to think about it, right? Or you just homebrew if you don't want to use any of that container crap. There are people who just use homebrew and Flatpaks, right? They open a store, they have a store, there's graphical stuff in there, right? 95% of the users, all they really need is a web browser anyway, right? So, you're still going to run into Flatpaks or you got to install Flat Seal and do the stupid shit or whatever, right? But generally speaking, for most people, right, even if all they needed was a web browser, you still couldn't give them a traditional Linux distribution because they'd get an upgrade pop up, right? And the D package will break because of some freaking reason, right? Or they try to figure it out, right? And then they pasted the thing and then they ended up with PPAs and all that stuff, right? And they just have a shitty experience. It's just a shitty experience, right? So the way we think about it is like, you know what? There's going to be people who are like, nope, I want to sit there and I want to do the Arch Linux thing. Like I've been you, man. Like I've gone through every phase, right? I had my enlightenment phase and everything, right? And then at some point you're like, you know what? When I need stuff, I like to go get stuff. But every single day, my everyday carry needs to just get out of my way, right? So you kind of settle in what you settle into, right? And then like the idea there is that person it's more of an appliance, right? Like we don't even do major distribution upgrades. We do it transparently in background for you, right? Like just every day you're getting an upgrade. It's like a continuous experience like they get with their phone, It's just every once in a while it'll come up, you'll do a reboot and you'll get an update for an app and stuff instead of, all right, it's June 12th. I'm moving to Debian 14 and you're doing an explicit upgrade. You know what I mean? Is any of this making sense? I don't. kind of rambling.
It's a.
I don't want to monopolize the mic.
It's fine. It's
yeah.
just it makes a lot of sense. It does, but what worries me is that we'll do the traditional Linux thing, and everyone will go do their own thing. Like
Well, everyone will do their own thing. I mean, of course it is. It's open source, right?
Right,
Like,
and obviously that's fine. That's what makes open source great, but it also makes it uber confusing for a lot of people. Like because Canonical is going to do their own immutable thing. Is going to be
yeah, Ubuntu
different.
Core, it's coming out this fall.
Yeah,
I got to play with it. It's going to be good.
Well, I'm sure it's going to be good, but it's going to be another thing that people who are really bad at explaining things like me have to try to explain to other people and say it's probably why I won't make a video about this, because I won't be able to get my how is this different from that different, why is this way doing it
Ubuntu
better?
Core is an easy one. Ubuntu Core is an easy one. It's like, you ever try to install a package in Debian and Ubuntu and it tells you it can't because they have the same man page? You ever run into that problem?
Mm-mm.
Or like, all right, so there's just all this crap in dpackage and apt and all these old kind of traditional systems, right? Where it's like people just, the model shifts from, I just want one image, right? Like instead of a bunch of individual packages, I just want a thing that upgrades at once. Fedora is different in this regard, and so was OpenSUSE, because they're already making RPM packages, right? So all they do is kind of splat out an image at the end, right? So this is the term we're using now. So like, of course it's composable. There's a file. The composable part of Universal Blue is the GitHub repo, right? That tells you, take this and then do this crap to it, right? And then it's a bunch of scripts, right? And then a deployment what we call a deployment artifact in cloud comes out the other end, right? And that's the image. In this case, that just happens to be your operating system, right? And then when it's splatted on your disk, right, it's like one thing. Like Clear Linux is like this. Clear Linux has versions of their individual packages, right? But if you say which version of Clear Linux you're on, it's like 35,634. It's got some stupid long number, right? And when you report a bug, they're not really interested usually. Well, they'll ask you for the package version, right? But they're asking you for that OS version because it's a lot easier to test a bunch of stuff where it's like, this whole thing is one version. You know what I mean? So like, that's the appeal for like Linux. Is the reason SUSE and Red Hat and all these people are doing this is it saves a lot of time when you can guarantee that everyone is on the right stuff, right? Like if two of you are on computers and you're on Bazite version, blah, 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 I know down to the bit that it's going to be the same, right? That's what makes debugging easier on systems like this, right? Because you could be like, okay, it was working on Friday. I know that today's Tuesday. Let me rebase to Friday and it should work, right? And then you reboot into it and it works because you knew it worked on Friday. You know what I mean? Right? So that makes debugging and things are easier, right? Because everyone's trying to save cost. That's the problem with the Linux desktop. It's too fucking expensive, right? You have all of this hardware that needs to be, accounted for. And every time I talk to someone at SUSE or Red Hat, I work in the industry, by the way. That's how I know all this stuff, right? So I talk to them all the time. They're like, yeah, it's a pain in the ass. Even working with the OEMs is a pain in the ass, right? You ever buy a Dell Sputnik and it has a Linux bug? That shouldn't be, you know what I mean? But sometimes it's just consumer hardware. It's just hard, and accounting for that is very difficult. Whereas we're on server and cloud, the super high-end hardware stuff is paid for, right? And then the rest is just generic VMs on a cloud, right? So that's kind of why I go after this cloud native speak, is what I call it, right? If they're using the same tools to generate your desktop distro as your server distro, right? That should make it easier to just test the whole thing.
Yeah,
right?
That makes sense. Nate, you had a question or something to say?
It was more related to the Flatpaks. You're talking about immutable distros, right? Have you noticed that Flatpaks seem to have gotten a lot more bloated in regards to trying to install them? Because I've noticed that for me, like on Pop! OS, they push Flatpaks. That's one of their biggest things.
Yeah. So
but
this is,
I have had several issues with Flatpaks as of recent, being way too large.
yeah. So part of the reason is like you want to move. I have a video on this. I can't find it right now. It's like your applications always are going to need libraries, right? The question is, do you want those libraries coupled to the distro, right? Or do you want Flatpak to handle it? Which is different. than a traditional Linux distro. And that's something that you should mention, right? It's like, all right, so instead of, all the libraries and stuff for the applications living on my host, they're coupled to Flatpak now, right? And that guarantees that those apps always have that runtime, right? Which sucks sometimes because sometimes you have to have two, right? Like I have one app that depends on an old runtime. So I have like 2 copies of the free desktop SDK.
I have like 12 versions of Mesa installed.
Yeah, and all that stuff. So there is duplication happening back there, but it still sucks that you kind of have to like do that, right?
I think we have a problem where we use the terminal and most people don't. So if you're just using the store, like the GNOME software store, and install Flatpak, you're never going to know that you have 38 Flatpaks installed along with it, unless you go into the terminal and do Flatpak lists.
Yeah. So this is why I consider Flatpaks and image-based OSs to be the way forward. Is like, I think bolting on Flatpak onto a traditional distro is kind of like a stopgap, right? Because first of all, your distro already has a bunch of packages already. Now you're confusing people with 2 package stores again, right? On top of the other crap they have to know. You know what I mean? So like for me, it's like the image-based, when the OS doesn't have to have a package manager, right? Other than updating and doing the nerd stuff, right? Then Flatpak kind of becomes the package manager, and then it comes with its own libraries and everything. You know what I mean? You're moving the application libraries from being the distribution's responsibility to now being FlatHub's responsibility, right?
Are they going to fix the theming in Flatpak eventually, the Flat packages eventually, so that it just uses the GNOME Adwaita thing instead of just always being light theme? That'd be nice.
Is that a question?
Like, you're the guy in the know. Like every time I install a Flatpak, it's always Adwaita light, even if I'm using the dark version on GNOME.
Really?
Yeah. Now I actually don't know if that's still true recently.
All of mine are black. Huh. That doesn't sound right.
Trying to find a good example. Oh, I have the perfect example. Tilix was exactly that way. I installed. There's a rogue. It might be because that
Tilix.
That's a non-maintained application. That's probably the reason why that came along that way. What's another one that I'm new to GNOME, so I need to figure out where all my applications are.
Oh, it's okay. I roll with only dark themes, so all my stuff's always dark. If that's your question.
Let me.
Oh, you got people that want to talk. I don't mean to monopolize them. Everyone quit. They're like, wow, this guy's.
Arch Penguin, go ahead.
Yeah, that's definitely an issue that I've run into. Is themes just do not apply to Flatpak at all on any distro I've ever used yet. So,
well,
unless the app itself may have adjustments that you can make to try and match it, but I definitely haven't seen that they match your themes at all. Usually just like a flashbang.
So I have a couple examples. Nextcloud Desktop does something really weird with the theme. I'm pretty sure that's going to be a Nextcloud Desktop thing and not a Flatpak thing. But I've talked to other people who use
that. Doesn't look. Let's see.
And then there was another one. I'm looking through my list of Flatpaks here. Oh, Music Brink Picards came out with white, but those might just be individual application things. Maybe it's not a flat. It used to be across the board. I don't know if it's because now there's actually an Adwaita theme that comes, but that's actually a KDE thing.
My Nextcloud comes in and it clearly has different widgets.
Mine's completely.
So is this a GTK app? What's this written in?
I don't actually know. All I know is mine's completely unreadable. It has you can't see it unless you're looking at the stream, but it has like a I don't know, black on black text. So I'm assuming that's just a like a Nextcloud thing that's a problem. But I've talked to other who have the same problem that it's solved it through the Flatpak. So it might just again be that.
Yeah, mine's in dark mode. It looks correct. However, when I toggle the dark mode button, the title bar gets white, but the app stays dark.
Yeah, it's weird. All right.
But I bet you if I move it into white mode. Yeah, me.
So whatever your version of Linux is going to be my next version of Linux. Once my 2-year time on OpenSUSE is done, I'm going to be going to the OpenSUSE whatever. The problem is I want a term for it, and you guys need to, that's
just say the next generation. Just say unbroken Linux.
No.
Just call it next gen.
Linux, the next generation should be exactly what we call it. We should get T-shirts.
Be the marketing guy we need.
We're so gonna get sued.
Because if you sit next to me on a plane, like I use Linux just like the rest of you do, right? Like it's just it's divorced from the image that's on the metal. You know what I mean? All my customers say all the stuff I'm doing is not on the system itself, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
That's just my default. Like, you know, it's like I tell people do your distro hopping or whatever, and then whenever you decide the thing that you want, right? And they're like, okay, this is what I'm going to roll with, because at that point it's something you're using for your job. You know, that's when you realize that, okay, reliability is a must, right?
Nate,
and
doing, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Doing major upgrades and stuff. I can't afford my computer to not work. I mean, sorry.
Yeah, Nate.
Well, I was going to ask, do you think Flatpak will ever actually use your system theming at all? Because I know it doesn't work at all. I've pulled up 3 Flatpaks and they're all just dark gray.
Oh, I don't know.
Like
I run nothing but Flatpaks, so this is the first time I've even.
I think we have some variables here too of like what desktop environment and everything like people are using. Like there could be other factors at play here besides just Flatpak and Linux.
Nate's using GNOME from Pop, but I think that more the thing is that I don't know about if I'm making this assumption, Nate, but when you talk about themes, you're talking about like the hacky way we used to do themes, like with GNOME tweaks, and I don't think that that's ever going to be something that the Flatpaks guys really ever focus on. But
I just use Yaru or whatever, and
the libadwaita stuff. I think that if you use like gradients or whatever, it will affect the Flatpak stuff just like it will everything else. At least it seems to have for me now that I go around with it. But there's still a couple that don't. But I think that now that I think about it, the reason why that doesn't work is because those are GTK3 applications. Of course, libadwaita is not going to work. Things just going on. Arch Penguin, go ahead and go.
Yeah, it for some reason, I think what he means by themes would be GTK or Qt, correct, Nate? I'm guessing that's what he's meaning.
It's native.
And for me, it didn't matter if it was GTK or Qt. For some reason, Flatpaks just do not take on the system theme. It's like, and they always default to like flashbang, like burn your eye sockets out. It's really, I don't understand why, but that's what they do.
War Thunder.
I got this cool plugin. At Day, I like the Day theme, and it'll auto switch your GNOME theme, and all those work. I don't know.
I think it depends. So like, and I'll bring up Mint as an example. There are some like GDK themes, like I've noticed it when I've because I have install scripts when I set up like this system's LNLMDE. I have install scripts that set everything up for me. Once I figure it out once, I'm lazy. I don't want to do it again. But I've noticed on Mint, they're getting around some of it because using the Mint themes, it's installing the same GDK theme repackaged as a Flatpak. So when the system calls for the system theme, probably unless you're giving it very explicit permissions to the user share themes or to one of the other directories, it's telling the Flatpak, hey, I need this theme, and it goes to the Flatpak part of the system and goes, I need this theme. And then if you don't have your permissions set up, which is always a nightmare, then it just gives you a blinding whited Weta theme or whatnot. And it is worse on GNOME than it is anywhere else.
Well, also
because Weta just doesn't want to play nice.
We also have to remember that the GTK guys and the GNOME guys, they're very adamant towards the fact that there is only one theme. It's Adwaita. There's a dark version of it. That's it.
That's what I use.
It's broken on GTK3.
That's what all standard GNOME guys use. But the nerds amongst you, George, they are still. adamantly holding on to GNOME tweaks with their dying hands, right?
Dude, I've been trying to kill that thing for 15 years. Man.
The elementary guys did try, and it's still around on elementary OS too. They just do that, and as someone who likes to, rice or whatever we want to call it these days, I understand, but I've come to the point where the vast majority of the GTK apps that I use are libatdueta, and gradients just works for me. Like, that's the future of theming, is gradients. I wish that it was a little bit more full featured, but once you understand that there's that fourth tab in gradients that allows you to do custom CSS,
Sure.
you're golden.
Wait.
So,
holy shit. Sorry, I just discovered this.
Gradients?
I remember gradients, but this custom CSS.
Yeah, it allows you to. So there's like certain parts of GTK that won't let you. They don't do by default, but you can just put the CSS to like do the panels of the settings app, or the panels of Nautilus will allow you to. If you do the CSS for them, you can change the colors too, and that's like officially supported. GNOME's not going to take that away from us.
You could do it in your .config as well.
Yeah,
if you're doing like non-Flatpak stuff, because I use it on Mint as a hack on some high resolution displays to make the title bars a little bit bigger and the buttons for closing that just a little bit bigger, because sometimes it's hard because just fractional scaling just doesn't work.
Yeah, if I could get my hands on a GNOME developer and just beg them to please, for the love of all that's holy, try not to kill minimize. Like, you've already killed it, bring it back. Like, I want my apps to minimize. I want to be able to minimize to the tray or to the favorites. I want to be able to have an actual minimized button. If they brought it minimized, I would never need GNOME tweaks ever. Like,
why don't you just add
the idea?
Well, you can add it with GNOME tweaks.
Take GNOME tweaks and just like take GNOME settings and just force them together like this, so they just be an extra tab called tweaks.
You can add the minimize button back with G settings in the terminal if you want, so you won't have to use tweaks.
Yeah, that's what I use.
But I don't want to have to do that. Like,
but you do it once and you're done forever.
Well, if you're running an immutable distro, that's actually true.
If you're running a composable distro, you really only have to fix everything once.
Just bringing it full circle.
We're getting to you.
Yeah,
that's the trap, dude.
Nate, go ahead, wrap us up.
Two things. Pop Shell fixes GNOME, by the way, and I will gratefully be glad when when the Cosmic Desktop comes out, because I can kiss GNOME's butt goodbye. See you. Which is coming out in September, by the way.
There's a UBlue image. We got it rolling.
I will. Okay, so just to finish us out, who wants to take bets on what comes out first, GIMP 3.0 or Cosmic Desktop?
Cosmic.
Cosmic, 100%.
Cosmic for the win, dude, for sure.
Cosmic. Okay.
Definitely not GIMP, yeah.
And Cosmic's even on Wayland, and GIMP 3.0 will be a turd on Wayland anyway.
Well, if we could just, like, there are a lot of really good features that I'm looking forward to in GIMP 3.0, but if they don't fix the stupid bug where it opens up on the wrong monitor, I'm going to strangle somebody. I swear to God. That's the stupidest. KDE has the exact same problem, but this happens no matter what desktop you're running. It always opens up on the wrong monitor. So I've gotten to the point now where I'll actually turn to the monitor that I don't want it on, open it there, and then it'll open up on the right monitor. It's the stupidest thing I've ever seen. What?
See, I just have all the UI just don't scale.
I hate to tell you this, but that's also a problem on Windows.
I wouldn't know. I haven't used Windows in years at this point, other than to fix my mother's computer, because she won't switch to Linux. All right, everyone who watched this live, thank you so very, very much for this. We do
36 people watching.
Yeah, we do two lugs every single month. So if you want to join us, join the Discord. That's where I share the link. It's no longer a treasure hunt. We can avoid the trolls now. But anyways, if you want to join us live, you can do that. Everyone is welcome as long as you have a reasonable microphone. And as you guys can tell, it doesn't really require all that much. You don't even have to have one if you don't want to talk. If you just want to stay muted the whole time, you're welcome to do that. But if you're going to talk, at least try to not to be in a place where it's like really, really super loud, or have some good noise cancellation or something. But you don't have to have like a super audio setup. We don't care. It's just a bunch of dudes sitting in a Jitsi room, and we talk about Linuxy things. The next one will be in early, I guess the next month is June. I know the order of the months. It'll be like the second Thursday of June at 11:15 a.m. Eastern time if you guys want to join. And anyways, that's it for this one. I hope everyone had a wonderful time. And we did kind of transition to different topics, but I think that we always do that. So
Yeah, sorry to crash the party, man, but
No,
thanks for having me.
we nerded out on audio for like 20 minutes before we even got that. That wasn't even close to the thing. Like, and the thing is, we talk about Linux audio every single Linux user group because there's always someone who has problems with audio. Like it's
That's amazing, man.
Guaranteed. All right. Anyway.